Nigeria Senate President Godswill Akpabio and Speaker House of Representatives Tajuddin Abbas have been urged to reject the recently reintroduced social media regulation bill. In a statement released yesterday, the Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, said that the passage of the bill would unduly restrict the rights of freedom of expression and privacy, and urged President Bola Tinubu's administration to stop its efforts to compel technological firms like Google and YouTube to restrict such fundamental human rights. Joining us this morning is the Deputy Director, SERAP, Kolawole Oluwadare. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
All right, you've talked about restricting rights to privacy. I want you to give us a picture of what this current attempted social media regulation might look like.
Thank you very much. I like the way you said attempted social media regulation, but this is not the first time. We've seen this come and go in the previous national assemblies, the effort of the government to regulate, and I've often wondered the basis of that regulation to regulate social media. Whereas this is a global conversation, and we need to understand that this is not new, but we also need to understand the nuances and the context of Nigeria, as it were, including historical antecedents. What the government wants to do is to not only moderate what is said and who says what, but also get the players, the stakeholders in this, particularly the technological agents, the social media organizations, to disclose to them information that might otherwise be a breach of privacy and other rights. This in itself may look harmless. It might even look legal, but perhaps people can justify it, and I mean the government can justify it by some national security concerns, which is what they do all the time. But again, we must look at this carefully vis-a-vis the rights of citizens. And this is against the background of governance in Nigeria, where we've seen a lot of well-meaning or good-looking laws, as it were, that have been used to trample on the rights of citizens, particularly in the absence of civil liberty laws that would cushion the effect of this kind of law. So the question is, what is the problem with social media? How come the government thinks social media is a problem that requires regulation? What about the economic problems here? There are myriads of problems that we have that government is yet to address. What makes social media so urgent and important in order to regulate it? And that is the question that should be at the minds of legislators as they examine this bill.
Okay, well, let's also, we'll get back to legislators in a bit, but I also want to, talk about, when it gets to the level where the NBC itself, seems to be even complaining about social media. What do you think might have happened? Or, because I remember when the National Broadcasting Commission said in their letters, I think it was about a week ago, that one of Nigeria's major problems is social media and described it as a monster. So tell me about that, and if this is beyond just the National Assembly, and if there are other government agencies that maybe are feeling threatened or maybe are concerned about what social media might do to Nigeria.
The statement credited to the NBC just shows the mindset of public officers in Nigeria, whether they're elected or appointed, particularly people who hold any kind of authority to escape accountability. So when I have that social media is a monster, and I really would want to understand the context of that statement. What makes it a monster? Is it the kind of expressions that go on in social media? Or is it because the government has no control? The gatekeepers are not the traditional gatekeepers that we see in media. So really, it is very important to understand the context when the NBC says that social media is a monster. But if we look at the historical incident and what has been happening in our democracy since 1999, we can perhaps infer that what the government means and why the government fears social media really is because of the power it has given citizens to express themselves. And don't forget, freedom of expression is a fundamental right. It's so important that it is placed in the Constitution in Section 39. And freedom of expression has various means of going about it. In writing on the t-shirt, in the freedom of expression, this convention we're having right now is in excess of freedom of expression. So social media is just another tool that allows people to express themselves, that is to impart and to receive information. And so how is that a monster? Because people are able to use that effectively and perhaps to hold government accountable. I think that is why government thinks it's a monster, because people can express themselves freely. And don't forget, it's very important to underscore this point, that everything that would amount to a crime in real time will also be a crime online. So and the same thing goes for rights. So freedom of expression as a right in physical terms is also a freedom of expression online. And so there are enough laws that will take care of national security concerns or issues of defamation or libel, for instance. As those laws are there already. We do not need a regulation, as it were, to regulate social media from stopping it from being a monster. And I quite disagree that social media is not a monster.
All right. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, this is not the first time that there's been moved to quote unquote regulate social media. In 2019, the bill was the Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulations Bill 2019, but of course it was failed to be passed into law due to public outcry. How do you see this one turning out? Do you think that this would also be failed, it will fail to be passed into law, or I mean, what do you think will be made of this one?
I would be a bit reluctant to predict that it would fail, but what I do know is that it should fail. And that is why it's very important that Nigerians take up this advocacy now, to compel members of the National Assembly to turn down the bill, to vote against the bill. And really, before they can do that, the people themselves must understand, and members of the National Assembly must understand the context and the issues behind social media and how it has come to be a major player in public discourse and shaping public opinion. It's not necessarily something to fear. Really. Governments, but by that I mean politicians, use social media to campaign along with their followers. But suddenly they get into power and social media becomes the problem. Really, the call to action now is for Nigerians to make sure that members of the National Assembly in their various constituencies understand the issues and are made to vote against these bills.
Okay, and is there any other ways around being able to control the freedom of expression of the people? If this fails, has the Nigerian government over time been able to figure out other tactics with which they can control that free speech? I remember, and it's said pretty often, that this current administration came into office mostly, with the use of social media. 2014 was a really wild and chaotic year on social media, and of course they rolled into office. But since then, they've tried to figure out ways with which, they maybe can put it under control. So if this doesn't work, do you think that there's any other ways that there might be attempts to at least curtail, speech?
Social media is regulated, quote unquote, already as it were. And so there is no need for control. And I would really call what government wants to do control, not regulate. I think they are submitting the word control for regulate, the word regulate for control, pardon me. And so government has no right to control freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is a fundamental right in the Constitution. And the Constitution, along with other rights, has created a balance, call it checks and balances, that mitigates against the misuse of that fundamental right. And the laws are clear. So I mentioned that you would be liable for defamation online as you will be liable for defamation in real time. So there are regulations, as it were, and there is no need for a special regulation. Even when it comes to data and digital rights, there are regulations for that already. The Nigeria Data Protection Commission is there. So, and there are rules and policies in all that ensure that people conform. What the government wants to do, that they should not be allowed to do, is to control freedom of expression. That is a breach of fundamental rights, and it shouldn't stand. And at any rate, the Constitution has envisaged all these issues and has created a balance to say that, of course, the state can make laws that would impact on some of these rights insofar as they conform with what is called the three-part test. Is it legal? Is it necessary? And is it proportional? So in this instance, any bill to regulate social media, no matter the name it is called, is it necessary? I don't think so. Will it be legal? I don't think so. Because Section 39 is very clear. Is it proportional? Is that a response to whatever is seen as monstrosity on social media? Is this bill, is it a proportional response? I disagree also. So it is on that basis that I see social media is regulated, as it were. It doesn't need control. What the government wants to do is control freedom of expression, using social media as one of the aspects of that tool, and it shouldn't be allowed to stand.
But aren't there concerns, or don't you have any concerns, about people also misusing social media in ways that it could incite violence, could incite chaos, could incite maybe also protest, against protest is also, a fundamental right, but aren't there concerns that you have or you've seen over time that there's a way that these things are also used that could also be very, very dangerous to Nigeria's unity and the likes? If you remember, I'm sure that it might also have been one of the things that was considered, and that was when the election tribunal was about to, give its rulings. There were accusations that people were posting pictures of judges and their children and whatnot. So do you share similar concerns? And do you think that these things could also be a problem?
The concerns are there. As long as we have human beings on this earth, there will be concerns. But we need to understand, social media is a tool, is another tool that facilitates the freedom of expression. So the regulations that regulate other human rights would apply. So you have mentioned an instance about posting people's families' pictures online. It's a breach of privacy. And there are remedies for that, either in the civil suit or in some instances, a criminal procedure. That exists already. It is to understand that whatever the rights, limits, and obligations that are put to an individual in real time will also transfer to that online. And in this context of social media, there are concerns. But I'm saying there are regulations, laws, policies, and procedures that takes care of that already. What the government wants to do really is to use that pretext to curtail freedom of speech. And it is very important. Freedom of speech is very important to democratic practice, to even people participating and lending their voice to whatever, to ensure that those in public offices are held accountable.
All right. These are very important conversations to have. We've had about 182 internet shutdowns across over 30 countries, and it's an important conversation to have. Some would argue for, some would argue against, but I'm hoping that in the coming months we will see, sense and reasoning prevail. Very quickly, as we wrap up this conversation, I know that SERAP is a voice that has constantly held the government to account. Would you share with us maybe some latest case you're working on and, the expected outcomes?
How about we have not sued anyone for about a week or so? Maybe
that's amazing.
Which is a record.
Wow.
But I'm sure, I'm sure if you follow through with the purchase of vehicles in the House of Reps or National Assembly, there were 160 million per vehicle. I'm sure, you might be typing that lawsuit as we wrap up this interview. Well, we'll see. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for joining us.